Hello, welcome everyone to our overview of Corn Trials 2023. In this video, we'll be covering our hybrid plot data as well as our larger in-field side-by-side comparisons. And at the end of the video, we'll be covering our silage data as well. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start this video out with explaining some of the testing methods we use to get some of the conclusions we come to. We use three main methods. Our first method is on-farm studies at Walgamuth Farview Farms. A lot of the split planter trials, sprayer trials, fungicide trials, depth trials, all that stuff we do on a large scale at Walgamuth Farview Farms. The second method we use is third-party testing with a service called JG Ag Service. They perform all our small block replicated trials, a lot of our hybrid test plots, some of the pivot bio trials, and smaller trials that we need to replicate multiple times. They perform for us. We also pull from our dealer network of fellow peers I have in the industry and pull some of their plot data in and analyze that as well for a broader view of the testing. I'd like to explain some of the testing methods we use and how we do it. Most of the industry and a lot of dealers you'll talk to, a lot of the data comes from what we refer to as strip trials. So trials like these where you start with one hybrid on one side of the field and just one strip after the other of different hybrids. And what the problem with this is the bigger the field gets, the more variable the trials get. So when you're trying to test 15, 20, 25 hybrids, the field can vary significantly from one side to the other. You can have rock ledges, different soil types, better water holding capacity in the bottom, etc. So how we've combated this is we've contracted a lot of our individual plot data out to JG Ag Service. And what they do is what we call block trials. So a lot of different hybrids in the same field replicated multiple times in blocks of 4. So as you can see, it looks like this. You have three different replications of the same hybrid. So in this corner in the middle and at the bottom. And then what we do to make it even more precise is we only harvest the middle 2 rows out of that 4-row block. So we don't have contamination from the outside rows and other hybrids pollinating next to it. It gives us a much more accurate feel. JG Ag Service does all this for us. All the hybrids this year have been replicated 3 times to give a more precise analysis of yield potential throughout the field. And the other method we use on the larger on-farm trials is a side-by-side method, where we split a 16-row planter in 2 and plant continuously across the fields for larger multiple acre blocks. This gives us a good feel of what that hybrid will do in field across varying soil types and conditions. All right, the first results we're going to get into are the 103 to 110 maturity trial. This was one of those replicated block trials that JG Ag Service did for us. So each hybrid here was replicated 3 times and then averaged out. Leading the pack this year was 105.35. Some of you guys had that this year. It was new for last year. Seemed to do really well under the stressful conditions it had this year. Next is 56.26. That's been really good as well. It's won multiple trials from Maryland into PA. So we got a couple side-by-sides here comparing all these. And concentrate on the top few here and a couple of the side-by-side results we have with those. First up, we had 56.26 versus the 105.35 in a field. This was planted earlier than the trial was. 56.26 had a really good advantage in this instance. That seems to favor the really good ground. It's got a lot of top-end high yield potential and a 15 bushel advantage on that. I think we're kind of looking to stage these 2 hybrids with each other, but for different circumstances. The 56.26 really seems to have that good high-end potential. And that 105.35 has good potential, but also can kind of go do the dirty work on some of the tougher acres. They look pretty good pair for each other. Next, we have the 105.35 versus the P0487. Here we had a 14 bushel yield advantage with the 105.35. On this farm in particular, we had fairly stressful conditions, about a farm average of about 201 across the whole farm. One thing we did notice as well, the 105.35 definitely had better stalk quality than the 0487, and the corn wasn't terribly dry yet. It was still 21% moisture, and we saw some pretty good stalk issues with the 0487. Next, we got the 105-35 versus the 636-16 from AgriGold. Only about 2 bushels difference here. 636-16, good looking plant type, good stock quality. It is taller than the 105-35. We had this in silage trials as well. It'd be a good dual purpose for some guys. Does seem to have the low end drag. We had it on a couple different farms where the yield potential wasn't as high and seemed to do quite well. Again, the 105-35 did well, has been good across all soil types. All right, next in that same field, we had the 105-35 versus P0075. This corn's been really good locally. I wouldn't call it a 100-day corn as they've staged it as, more of 105. I think in this trial in particular, we looked at the moisture difference. There's about a half a point difference between the 105-35 and the 0075. And we had a 10 bushel yield advantage with the 105-35 in this field. Next up, we got the 5982 versus the P1077. This was dead even in this field in particular. I think last year we had about a 15 to 20 bushel gap. This was one on the worst farms we had this year. Field average of only 140, so pretty stressful. 5982 did have better stock quality in this instance. Next up, we got the 5982 versus the 63970 from AgriGold. This is one we had on a few farms this year. 5982 has been widespread for a few years. It's still one of our most dominant hybrids in the lineup. Can take any condition, good or bad. 63970 is a great corn with good smart stacks traits in it. So good corn on corn potential. We had it a lot of different side-by-sides this year. Did well here versus the 5982. Low yield environment again, really poor conditions on this farm. Not a lot of rain late, but still held up with 5982, which has been one of our really good stress corns over the last few years. Here we have 5982 versus P0924Q. Had a 7 bushel yield advantage here with 5982. Fairly moderate conditions on this farm, 200 bushel average farm. Varying soil types. Again, 5982 did really well. And we got about the same results last year. This is our results from last year with a 5982 versus the 0924 in much poorer conditions in this case. Had a 10 bushel yield advantage there as well. Every time we've seen these two hybrids go up against each other, 5982 has come out on top as far as stock quality and yield. So now we'd like to look at the 110 to 116 maturity corn. Looking at the replicated data here, we're going to concentrate on the top 3 to start. AgriGold 64352 looked really good this year. We had a sneak peek at this in plots last year. Have a lot of supply of this year to sell. Has done really well last year and this year across the region. Seems to do well in poor or better conditions. Following that is 6270 DeKalb, which we've had for a few years. One of the most dominant products in the DeKalb lineup currently. One of our biggest sellers, will continue to be. Has done really well in all environments, good, bad, in between. It's always seemed to perform quite well. Follow that is 6141, one of the older products in the lineup currently. Has been doing well this year, but do have a replacement coming for that fixes a couple issues we have with that hybrid. We'll be talking about here in a minute. So first up, we have the AgriGold 64352 versus Pioneer 1383, both 113-day hybrids, lined up really well in maturity. Here we had a 7 bushel yield advantage with the 64352. And we saw very similar results in the plot. 64352 had about a 10 bushel advantage in the plot as well. Next up, we got 6269 versus 1289 Pioneer. 6269 is a sister hybrid of the 6270. It's just same hybrid with smart stacks in it. Has really good trait conversion. No yield drag like we have seen with some smart stacks in the past. Here we had one of our biggest wins of the year with 34 bushel advantage. DeKalb just looked better when we were harvesting it, looked better throughout the year. Just really had a dominating performance over the 1289. Next up, we got 6141 versus Pioneer 1136, both 111-day hybrids. 6141 did really well here, had a 16 bushel yield advantage. We've seen this in the past, had very similar results last year. So next thing we're going to look at, you can see in the bottom of the plot here, I've highlighted in red, DeKalb 11135. New hybrid last year, had a little bit of it to test this year. Had some plot issues with it this year, decided to show it anyways. really didn't do well at all in the plot. I think we had some plot seed issues, and one of the reps was really bad, and then we still averaged it out. Well, the interesting part is this: when we looked at this hybrid further, we had a larger infield trial of it versus the 6141, which is what it's here to replace. And we had a 5 bushel yield advantage with 111.35. We've also seen this trend across a bunch of other plots, which we're going to get to here in a few minutes in some of our other data. 105.35, although it didn't do well in the plot, we saw it do well in a couple side-by-sides throughout fields. Definitely looks like the future of 111-day corn with us. Same yield potential, or maybe a little bit better than the 6141, but it definitely has better stalk quality and much better grain quality. Higher test weight, just overall better quality, which is something we've always struggled with 6141. It's always kind of been on the edge with test weight and quality. 111.35 seems to be something to replace that with. So we're going to be mixing this in this year. Guys that were heavy 6141 before, we're going to try some of this 111.35, and I'm pretty confident that this is the future of 111-day corn here. All right, next we're going to look at 6422. Again, wasn't stellar in the plot, but did have some really good infield results. Didn't look good in a couple of the reps early on. Not quite sure what happened there, but we did a bunch of side-by-side testing with it. Again, it's a corn that's got great grain quality, semi-determinate ear type. Seems like it'd be a really good fit for the area. We also have some good dry down with it. So here we had a large side-by-side, went over almost a 25-acre span, side-by-side every pass. 6422 had a bushel advantage on the 643.52, which again had topped the plot. So they seem to be very well matched. 6422 was a little bit drier. Great stock quality on both. So definitely excited about the 6422 going forward. Here we had the 6422 versus Pioneer 1587, which we've seen a lot of in the area. Had a 20 bushel yield advantage over the 1587 and was considerably drier as well. 6422 seems to be a shorter 114-day corn, and Pioneer 1587 definitely a long 115. Really excited with the results there. 6422 had a good dominating performance. Next, we have 6422 versus DeKalb 6391. We sold quite a bit of 6391 the last few years. It's done well, but I think 6422, from what we've seen so far, is definitely going to be the replacement there. Fixes a couple issues we have with 6391 as far as stock quality, and wasn't as good in droughty conditions. 6422 seems to be something to replace that with. Here we are looking at results from the local DeKalb dealer network. We put together these reports every year called Yield Tracker Reports. Here we're looking at 105 to 111 maturity products, and how these reports work is they take all the plot data entered by dealers and then rank the hybrids. So if you're in the top third, you get green. Middle of the pack, you remain white, and then bottom, you're a red color. So it gives us an idea of what hybrids are trending in what areas. As you can see here, 5626 and 111.35, both which you talked about earlier, trending really well in PA currently. 5626, probably the most dominant product we've seen in that lower maturity class, and the 111.35 has done really well. You can see it compared there to the 6141, which has been good in years past. Next, we'll be looking at the 111 to 115 maturity products. Here you can see that 6270, which has been great and trended well this year, as well as the 6422, which is new for this year, which we talked quite a bit about earlier. Both hybrids seem to be the leaders going forward. Now we'll be looking at the corn silage data from this year. This data was all replicated plot data from JG Ag Service. So we had 3 reps of each hybrid. Going to start out here by looking at the 105 to 112 day maturity corn. Leading the pack this year was DeKalb 6180. Good dominating tonnage performance. This corn's been around for a couple years, has been really good. Always does well under droughty conditions, has really good stress tolerance. Following that is the 09F18Q. Just got that last year. Pretty impressed with that as far as the tonnage standpoint for 109-day corn, seems to do really well, and also really packs good digestibility consistently for a conventional hybrid. I'm excited about that one going forward if you guys are looking for something that's a little little earlier to harvest, but still packs everything you need. That's definitely something to look at. Middle of the pack here, we're looking at 12F08Q Brevant. Has been a yield leader here the last year or two. Was a little off in the plot this year, but locally in fields has been phenomenal. Always has great quality, good starch, massive plant type. Something anyone growing silage needs to look at. Has been very, very consistent. Looking down the list a little further, we had B11, B31Q. That was a new BMR that came out of Brevant last year. Not real excited about that one. For me personally, does not pack enough digestibility to really even be called a BMR. And it's a BM1 gene product, which hasn't been favorable for us. Something we're not really going to push on anyone, but we still wanted to put in the plot, just take a look at it. Down the list at the bottom, though, new BMR for this year called B08, B37 from Brevant. Didn't pack a huge yield punch, but on the digestibility side has been phenomenal. Had a couple guys grow this locally where they're looking at wet tests coming in at 75 to 76. Great digestibility. Good product that could go early. For green feed if needed. Pretty excited about that one going forward. We've also ranked the hybrids just by digestibility and just by starch. Obviously the BMRs are always here at the top on digestibility. But again, 6180 and 09F18 did really well for conventional corns. Something that can fit anyone's lineup. And then looking at the starch side, AgriGold 630-616 was number 1. It's also pretty good dual purpose corn, can go either way. Someone needs an early season silage, and everything else kind of falls in the line where we think it would be on that one. All right, next we're going to look at the 113 to 117 day corns. Leading the pack this year was DeKalb 6609. That was more of an experimental this year, so we don't really have any supply of that one yet. Just wanted to look at it on a plot, see what its potential was. Looks like it can really ton. On the digestibility side, though, a little questionable what we're going to see out of that one. I want to see a couple more years research out of that. Number 2 is 6444. This has been one of our biggest silage sellers out of DeKalb the last couple years. Always excited about this one. Does really well in under all conditions. Tonnage, digestibility, starch has always been good, and it dries down pretty good for a 114 day hybrid. Anyone growing silage needs to take a serious look at this. This corn has a lot of potential and always really feeds out quite well. Next on the list is B14H38, new one out of Brevant we're looking at. It's first year looking at it. Want to look at it a little more in depth to see what it is, debating if it's a good enough replacement for something like B12F08Q. So down the list a little more, you see a couple more hybrids from other companies than ours, a couple experimentals that we don't have out yet. And then there at the bottom again, BMR didn't do great under the stressful conditions, but did boast significantly better digestibility than the others. Here we have our rankings again by digestibility and by starch. Not surprised, BMR leads the pack in digestibility. The next two are interesting. They're experimentals. Can't quite talk about them yet, looking at them from experimenting this year, but pretty excited about them because they are conventionals that have good digestibility and starch combinations. Something we hope to get here in the future once they get fully released. And then starch, again, 6444 right there, top of the pack, something we've seen in years past. Very good hybrid. So that concludes our overview of the corn trials for this year. Stay tuned soon. We're going to be coming back with a lot of the other trials we did. We did some seeding depth trials, some fungicide trials, population trials, and some other additives. So stay tuned for that. It'll be coming very shortly. And thank you and have a great day.